Carson City Audit Committee meeting. Let's do a roll call.
Chairperson Ferguson.
Here.
Member Bagwell. Here. Member Mayhorn.
Here.
Member Molina. Member Wells.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Public is invited at this time to comment on or discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on an agenda item during the item itself. Any action may be no action may be taken on a matter raised under the public comment unless the item is specifically included on the agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. So we don't have any public here, so.
Don't forget to ask for the phone if there's anyone online.
Is there anybody on the phone?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Okay, thanks. Next item is approval of the September 7th, 2021 meeting minutes. Any comments, questions, or concerns on the minutes as they stand? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the minutes of September 7th, 2021 as submitted.
I'll
Second.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you. Next item's up for action is adoption of today's agenda. Any questions or additions to the agenda?
No changes I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, thanks. Next item's meeting items 6A. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the citywide payroll process, internal audit, and recommendations. Sherry.
Good morning. So yes, this is the afternoon, I'm sorry. So this is the last big audit for that I was worried about for the enterprise system that we just implemented. Because those things that fall through the cracks can really be big. And I was pleasantly surprised that they actually found no dollar amount calculation errors and no problems. It was mostly just documentation and permission based. But I'll turn it over to Nicholas and Audrey, who I believe are on the phone, to talk about what their procedures and findings.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry. This is Audrey Donovan. Hopefully you all can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Yes, good. I'm seeing some nods. Thank you. I rushed back from Salt Lake City, Utah, visiting some family out there, and my flight was delayed a couple of hours. And sorry for the background commotion, but kids are coming home from school, and it's quite the happy moment right now. Lots of energy around here. But wanted to, kick off the payroll audit and then turn it over to Nicholas Sidikovic to walk us through any background findings, recommendations, which we did have a few findings and recommendations. So let me go ahead and start off by giving you a brief background about the citywide payroll, which is we did perform an independent assessment, which is why we are here, of the entire citywide Carson City payroll process. And this was really to ensure that the payroll is processed accurately, completely, and timely. Additionally, this review evaluated the adequacy of the related internal controls. And this is we were looking at were people, processes, and the payroll systems. And that included Munis, TellStaff, and WendellWorks. During our assessment, we identified 3 findings. The findings tended to be associated with primary improvements to the process. And I know that findings tend to be negative connotations, but as auditors, we see this as the ability to improve existing processes and also minimize the risks associated with the city's payroll. Uncovering these blind spots, in my opinion, really improve the organization overall. So we appreciate this opportunity to assist the city and applaud the finance department for their support, timely response, and effective internal controls. I will now turn it over to Nick Sidikovic, the manager who led this engagement, and he was also supported by a Bailey team in completing this on time and on budget.
Thank you, Audrey. Can you hear me okay, just to confirm?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. And again, like Audrey introduced, my name is Nick from Bailey. I was the lead audit manager on citywide payroll audit. First off, before I dive in, I'd like to express my thanks to the management and staff of the finance department for their timely and diligent assistance that they provided throughout the audit. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much. In the middle of September, we finalized the payroll audit, where we reviewed internal processes, procedures, and controls around accuracy and completeness of the payroll calculations performed by the payroll administration. Our scope was to review payroll records for fiscal year 2021, and we reviewed a sample of payroll records from both years, including 2020 and 2021, to get a better picture for the fiscal year. In designing our audit procedures, we considered risks and findings of prior payroll audits performed for the city, and we tailored our procedures based on those risks and our prior experience in understanding how the payroll should be processed. More specifically, let's touch on the scope of the audit. We looked at timesheet tracking mechanisms and associated management approvals, employment terminations to make sure that they were timely excluded from payroll, federal tax, income tax calculations, regular and overtime pays, as well as user roles and permissions in Munis system to ensure appropriate segregation of duties are in place as they relate to payroll functions. As Audit had mentioned, as a result, we identified 3 things, and I usually try to use my words carefully, but finding is the word that we use in audit report. Sometimes I personally call them observations, but we identified 3 things that represent more as opportunities for improving general control environment. And all 3 observations noted on our report are rated as low risk, and they do not represent any potential miscalculations in payroll that we reviewed. There were total of 3 observations. First one is in payroll administration itself to improve documentation around review and assessment of tax, any updates in tax laws and regulations. There is continuous communication that goes on between HR and finance, but unfortunately it's not formally documented or formalized. So our recommendation and observation was around that. And the remaining 2 were more IT related around the user roles and responsibilities to ensure that terminated employees are removed from the system timely. And we also had one area where there were a couple of users for former employees. I'm sorry, I'll digress. There was we reviewed specific payroll functionalities in the system, and we noticed that some of the HR staff had payroll functions. And right now, city's IT department is working to assess the needs of HR staff to have some of the basic payroll functions. But at this time, they are not considered do not represent any segregation of duty issues at this time. We solicited management's feedback from both payroll administration as well as IT department, and we documented them on our management responses section of the report. That would conclude my brief summary. If the committee wants me to go into detail of any observations or findings, I'll be happy to do so.
Hey, Nicholas, one quick question. How did, I'm seeing on the payroll discharges and the timesheet testing, it looks like you guys, the sample size was 12 for each. How did you guys determine that size? And 770 employees, was 12 like a kind of a statistically valid sample size?
Yeah, we generally follow AICPA's guidelines for our sampling. So this is a operational driven consulting type of service audit. We, first of all, before doing the sample, we try to understand how many employees and the records on any given payroll in the 26 payroll cycle. So first off, we looked at the time period. We attempted to look at the payroll files from 2 different years, 2020 and 2021. And within the 26 payroll cycles, we looked at the 3 different pay dates, and within each the payroll records out of 700, we looked at 12 employees from each for a total of 36 from 3 different pay dates. 1 in 2020, October, I believe, and did 2 in 2021. And we try to specify them in the audit report. So it's basically sampling based on, and then there's a subsampling within each pay period.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and the discharges, sorry, you're talking.
Just to add to that, that's pretty, I mean, I used to be an auditor, so that's pretty normal. If they did find something, they'd expand that sample to look at more.
May I ask? So on surface, it seems very small to me also, unless you can assure me that the 12 selected was a variety. So did we get overtime? Did we get shift diffs? I guess that's more my concern, is that the sample size, did it actually lead to enough payroll incidences to test the system. I guess that's what I'm more concerned about. If 10 of the 12 were just salaried employees, that doesn't really drive the test of accuracy of the payroll system. So if you can assure me that you were able to get enough of the instances of payroll, then I'll feel more comfortable. But I thought that was actually pretty darn small my own self.
I will elaborate that. It's actually that the number 12 is actually 36.
12 per payroll.
So yeah, 12 individuals from each payroll, 3 payrolls that we selected. The short answer is yes. So when we make our selections, we try to make a sample selections and sizes that are appropriate, that are good representative of the population. Generally speaking, like following the AICPA's general guidelines for consulting services, you know, a rule of thumb is generally about 10%, but we try to apply more conservative approach and use our professional judgment. And another, hopefully, maybe fact that may give you a little bit more comfort is that when it comes to payroll calculations that are actually not manual and more systematic, automated, where there are a lot of automated processes, sample sizes tends to be smaller because the machines or the computers do the same thing for all of them. So we try to pick employees from different pay periods, from different places or departments and things like that.
Did you look at different
Therefore-
unions at all, Nick?
I
Like
was
the
just gonna
firefighters
say, I tried to say that
union,
politely at the different instances. Yeah. Right.
like the different
Yeah,
employee
yeah,
groups?
Yes, exactly, different employee groups. Yeah, we didn't target one group over another. We just try to treat them equally.
So you, okay, you
in-
did. Okay. I'm pretty
in
sure we
one
gave them that
bucket, because
information, so.
everybody's up. Correct, yeah.
So,
I hope that gives a little bit more
I doubt that.
comfort.
so let me try a couple of different ways of getting at this. How many of the 770 people are in each of the 3 payroll systems? Do you know? So the beginning says there's 770 employees. There's 3 payrolls, or they're timekeeping systems, not payroll systems. There's 3 timekeeping systems. Do you know approximately how many are in each one, and how many of these tested were from each of the different timekeeping systems? Because to me, this was super small.
Yeah.
And especially given the fact that there's 3 different timekeeping systems, did we make sure we got people from all 3 timekeeping systems? Did we get different types of employees? So you've got, it sounds like one of the timekeeping systems is more like an hourly type punch in, punch out, whereas some of the other ones are more salary driven. Did we check some of the timekeeping for the punching in and punching out? Did we check some of the, overtime, like the mayor said, different types of payroll. So you've got shift differential, people who are working on different shifts that are going to get a different calculation for their pay. And this was just really small for me. I mean, there's 770 employees times 26 pay periods is 20,000 transactions. This is less than 0.2% of the transactions. The other thing I would like to know is are these the same 12 employees on the three different ones? Are they 36 completely different employees? Because that wasn't really clear in the language that was in the testing.
Yeah, we can go. We can definitely appreciate the question. We can definitely go back and clarify it. In my understanding, these are 36 individual employees. They're not the same employees. Secondly, regarding the timesheets, before we even dove into the payroll calculations, we evaluated. We tried to get an understanding of the timesheet keeping systems themselves. There are 3 of them, but they primarily use 2 of them. For most, and majority of them are in ExecuTime, which is automated system that talks to
Munis.
minutes. And there are really actually good controls to ensure that the old hours are not only entered but also approved by the supervisors, and there's a lockdown mechanism in place. In making our samples, we use the full listing from each payroll date. For example, if we selected November 13th, 2020, we have 700 plus employees, and we haphazardly judgmentally select from that list because that's where the payroll records are, what the dollars are. So selections were not made necessarily from the timekeeping system records itself. So in our sampling samples, when we looked at the detail, we went and verified the hours and the pay against the payroll records and the timesheets and so on to verify them. I understand if you think the sample size should be larger, but we try to use industry standard. It's versus some of the financial statement audits where their coverage is much higher, typically speaking. So.
So if I understand what you said correctly, you took the 36 or the 12 employees starting on the payroll side out of Munis, and then went back and verified that the system, that the payroll or the timekeeping system matched with the payroll processed.
Correct, and as well as the payroll records itself. Like we would check like certain particular title of the person and the salary, either salary or hourly. We checked against the HR records to make sure that payroll was picking up the right numbers.
And as far as how many employees are on which system, I want to say there's about 200 people using Telestaff, and it's Parks and Rec that uses the Wendell, the timekeeping. So depending on what season it is, that can be a huge fluctuation in people. And then everybody else would use ExecuTime.
Maybe I can ask a question in a little bit different answer for you is, while I'm hearing you indicate that a financial audit has a higher rate to review and versus a consulting contractual one, if I were to just isolate one payroll and not even the total transactions, just say I have 790 transactions and I look at 12 for that particular pay period, I didn't even get a 5% look, I guess. I'm just concerned is how is it that you're comfortable that 12 is sufficient to tell you that the system is working? Because one of the reasons that we even selected this audit and worked on it is we had the brand new system. And so I guess part of that reliance on that doesn't comfort me as well, because it's a brand new system on top of, if this is one we were auditing year number 3, year number 4, and it's the same system, that we would have good reliance in that fact. But we don't, because it was a brand new system. So I'm looking for you to reassure us as this committee that this audit actually reviewed a sufficient number of records to make us comfortable with our new system. I think that maybe I'm paraphrasing, but maybe that's what I'm trying to get to for all of us here is we just need a comfort that this is good enough.
I totally understand that. So I'd like to kindly ask not to focus too much on the 12 employees from each record. So how we developed a sampling methodology. So our population is 26 payrolls in a year. 10% of that is the 2.6. So rounded up, we're looking at that's how we selected 3 payroll dates. In each, because there are many employees in each payroll, and the controls and the processes are automated. Generally in IT testing, IT-like testing, control testing, automated processes, so sample size for automated processes are always small. If one number is, you have the same formula for 700 plus employees, it's not something that they calculate manually. There are data inputs and data outputs, which we checked both of them. Therefore, we judgmentally selected more reasonable sample size that would give us a good feel, across 3 payroll dates from 2 different years for 36 employees.
And if I can jump in here, Nick, and
Mhm.
further explain about financial statement audits versus operational controls. Our engagement was focused on the internal controls of the operations. Therefore, when we look at sample size, it's not looking at the number of transactions, it's looking at the frequency of the operations. We're looking at whether or not it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. If it's only performed once a year, we can only look at a test of one. And so the minimum sample size based on accepting 0 errors would be 25 total. And we increase that to keep some uniformity and consistency over the timeframes and went with 12 and spread it out over the year versus, and randomly selected transactions, employees, randomly selected the time periods and looked at those with 0 deviations in mind. Had there been any errors, any breakdowns in the time reporting or management's authorizations and approvals of the timesheets or calculations within the system or the process, we would have stopped what we were doing and either said, hey, we've got a finding, an issue here that we need to correct. We would have dug further to figure out the root cause. So I'm looking at this as I understand what you're saying, but we take a different approach when it comes to the operating controls versus validating the numbers that feed the financials. And in this case, we're also doing testing outside of just sample testing. We're also doing interviews, walkthroughs of the system. We're looking at supporting documentation. We're looking at end numbers truing up to the numbers that are entered into Muni. So it's more than just the sample testing that's performed.
And so I guess for me, that goes back to the question. I understand that this is not a financial system audit and you're not trying to tie out the number, but did you sufficiently, and I still have not heard to a degree of certainty, that the different types of payroll instances were tested to see that the systems that are driving this that are driving the payroll were all tested as part of this audit?
Yes,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
sufficiently tested.
The answer is yes. I just right now wouldn't be able to quantify how many individuals were tested from each of the 3 timekeeping systems, and 2 of them are used more predominantly than the others. But we tested all 3. We not only tested them for. So first off, the module that calculates the payroll is one. It's only Munis ERP. The hours that are fed into the Munis, they come from 3 different sources, and they were all included in our population and sample. In addition to that, before we performed any detailed testing, we evaluated the controls around those timekeeping systems and what they used for, who uses them, who approves them, and what documentation that payroll uses to verify, validate the hours, and how they do that. Because we evaluate, and we can only test things if we can place any reliance on the controls. If we cannot place the reliance on the controls that we saw and reviewed, our sample would be a lot larger than 36 employees that we looked at. It's part of the overall risk assessment process.
Any other comments on the sample sizing? One question, Nicholas, that I noticed you guys did tied out federal income tax withholding. Did you look at other withholdings like the state unemployment, federal unemployment, Social Security, Medicare to make sure those were properly calculated? Or did you guys just look at federal tax, making sure the federal tax tables were implemented correctly?
We didn't look at the Social Security and Medicare. We looked at the primary federal withholding. We looked at the regular pay, and we looked at the overtime. And there's also I forgot the acronym, it's a 4-letter acronym. It's like a federal employee overtime
FICA?
pay.
Talking about
FICA.
FICA?
I know it's F. I need to look at my notes. I apologize.
Okay.
I don't
I
have
mean,
it right.
the other, I mean, there's other withholdings too, like garnishments and, you know, I don't know if there's like some kind of pension or 401k withholdings.
401ks. There were also we also verified the HSA deduction contributions and things like that. So we basically, generally speaking, recalculated all the numbers that employees had on their pay stub.
Okay, so for the 36 different employees, you verified all the different withholdings that were on those 36
Yes,
checks?
yes, and
Okay.
we verified withholdings. Not only that, we also reconcile the payroll records in payroll administration versus HR records to make sure that, for example, that the base salary is picking up the right dollar amount and the right filing status and things like that.
Okay. Is this Munis system, is this like this is a CAN software package that's,
Yeah, Munis is our ERP system, so
Okay.
it takes care of the GL, the payroll, the AP, everything, receipts. It really does everything for us. Except it does have a timekeeping module. It just isn't as advanced as Telestaff for the different firefighter and police pays. And then it doesn't have like a clock-in system. So for you know, our part-time people who need to clock in and clock out in Parks and Rec, that's why we have that system. But everybody else uses ExecuTime, which was sold to us with Munis as a timekeeping system. So it feeds right into Munis.
okay.
Is that one an exception reporting? So if you're salaried, you only
No.
key in if you took a day off or something?
No, our schedules are in there. It gives us our normal schedule, 8 hours a day, but you have to put in there if it's a holiday or you have to adjust it every week. So I don't just put in my exceptions, it's the whole schedule.
And so we did, because it was just a random selection, we did not select a payroll that included a holiday to be able to test that. Just in my experience, I've always made sure one was a holiday because that's a big deal considering all of our different contracts with our unions, but we did
And I
not.
know, I mean, I don't know what they still, I don't know if they selected a pay period with a holiday, but I can tell you our payroll people look very closely at that. We send out email reminders to everybody in the city it's a holiday, make sure you code it correctly, and then we watch for it very closely.
Quick question, maybe just for Sherry. Does this payroll system encompass employee reimbursements for expenses, or is that a separate system outside?
No, we do that through AP,
Okay.
through accounts payable.
I've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
And does the system itself do the PERS report, or do you do that separately outside of the?
The system does do the PERS report. However, there's a lot of adjustments we have to make to it. So we do pull the information out of the system, but then we go through and check it line by line to make sure it's correct. It's a little bit of a process.
Sherry, may I add a few things? So, dear committee, I opened our Excel file where we did detailed testing. So it should cover some of the comments that I heard earlier. When we write the audit report, we try to keep it concise, not to make it too detailed. Honestly, it's like so that we don't overwhelm the readers. So by looking at my spreadsheet, starting from population and sampling and documenting our methodologies for sampling, we reviewed timesheets for 36 individuals, separate individuals, not the same 12 from each cycle pay period that we selected. We also looked at the earnings and all earnings and deductions in for each of the 36 in each of the 3 payroll records that we looked at. We tested PTOs, pay time off. I think city calls it a leave. They use different terminology, annual leave. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, annual leave. We in addition to verifying the accuracy of calculating the annual leave, we also verified opening and ending balances to make sure that accruals are not being over or under accrued, including any carryovers. We also looked at, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned, earlier I said 4 letters, FLSA compensation. When they were eligible, there were 3 employees that had that. So we tested that, and they rely on certain spreadsheet calculations. It's very detailed review. So those were among the things, the specific attributes that we tested for all 36 individual employees.
Nick, do you have the
from
pay
3 different
periods?
payroll.
Do you have the pay periods there?
11, 13, 3, 5,
Oh.
5, 28.
Is it in the report?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's on page. Yeah, it's on page.
2 or 14 of the packet. They're page 2.
Yeah, it's third bullet point for under timesheet testing paragraph.
So in Nevada
November
Day would probably
13.
be in the 11/13 one.
Of 2020.
So I think in the 11/13 pay period was Nevada Day in there because I think that means you would have selected a holiday.
It's the Friday. We have to. Well, and we have a different payroll period here too, right? Don't we start the pay period on the Friday and end on a Thursday? Something quite
Yes.
unique.
Yes.
I think we might be the only
And
government that
then
does that.
We
I'm
pay
like,
the next Friday.
yeah, I'm like, who does that? But anyway, I think that throws ours off. But it may have picked up the Friday holiday. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did discover that when I was doing, I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Did you want me to talk about real quick our responses to each of the findings, or did you have more questions?
Let's go into the management response. That'd be great.
Okay. So on finding number 1, that was the regulatory changes in payroll. We obviously do this every year, or we'd have the IRS and everybody calling, yelling at us because our W-2s are wrong. So we do this every year. We just don't document that we do it. So, which is, as an auditor, is terrible. I understand that. So we are going to start doing a memo to the file every time we do look at the regulations. And then finance is going to send it to HR so they're aware, they're going to sign off, and then I'm going to sign off, and we'll keep it in the file. So we have documentation. Finding number 2, this is the 2 users in Munis, and they still had access to ExecuTime, is my understanding, in Munis. However, their user for the whole system was shut off. So they could not get in the system, even if they wanted. I mean, they could, make changes, but they couldn't get in the system to make those changes in the first place. However, I agree that the user directory and the Munis directory should be the same, and IT agreed, so it made those match. And going forward, they're going to definitely look at that at least once a year to make sure they didn't miss anything. And then ongoing, they're going to try to keep it matching. And then number 3, the user roles and permissions. We're looking at this. There's 2 roles that both HR and finance have. And usually, you want those roles really segregated. Those 2 roles, we're not exactly sure. We're looking into what they do. So that we're going to get that answer hopefully before the end of December. But the thing we're worried about is our projections. Because in our projections for next year, we need to be able to move things forward to do the budget. So if we cut off certain roles, we might not be able to do that. So we're gonna make sure we can still do our projections and make sure everything's segregated appropriately. But I'll get back to you on what we find on that one.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on the
So
payroll audit?
just in general, and maybe it's a IT question. So while you're indicating that the system entry to get into the computer system was cut off for the people that were terminated, but a subsystem, they were still existing. And so obviously the danger is you use my ID and information on that subsystem because it wasn't cut off. So the question I have is, why is it not automatic if you have a terminated employee and it's taking the overarching system? Why doesn't it automatically carry through to all the subsystems to make sure people are not still, well, not maybe the individual, but someone else can use that ID and password to get in? I mean, that's what we're trying to make sure doesn't happen, right? So they're just not interrelated where it'll automatically say, oh, take all their rights away.
I'm just going to invite Frank to every meeting.
Does it make sense? You see where I'm going with this is I'm user Lori, and obviously the first access is into the system itself. And then what subsystems do I have rights to? So why, when I cut the main access, doesn't it cut automatically all the subsystems?
So that's a good question. This is Frank Abella, CIO for the city of Carson. The main concern on that, or the main issue, is Frank Abella leaves the company and someone has to take over his email and his files. Until that individual says, I don't need it anymore, we have to keep that person open, but the password has been changed. So we only have the password until we give that, say, if Sherry was taking over my position, or she was going to,
She's like, I'm gonna make this clear. No.
she was going to manage my
Right.
email or anything else of that nature. We keep Frank Abella open, but that password has been encrypted into a certain level, and it also has been changed. So Frank Abella cannot get back into the system. She doesn't have full access to Frank Abella's subsystems, only to what we need to give her or him. So whether it's email or files that's archived within the system, things of that nature. This is a common practice for any IT. Due to the fact is, until there is a email retention policy, like if we cut them off, we cut them off. Frank's cut off, have a nice day. If he gets his email, what we call in IT, it goes to the floor. Nobody gets it, right? The problem with that is there could be bills attached to that. It could be certifications that are attached to that and everything else. So that, to answer, I hope that answers your question to a degree.
Yeah, I'm trying to ascertain vulnerability periods of time. So is this something that,
Well, and I think
it's a 4-day window? It takes how long for IT to remove Frank, but give Sherry access to see Frank's old stuff? Is really what, like you said, on an email system and things like that. And so I'm used to, suddenly on my computer, when I had staff leave, right, I get a little folder that says Sherry's data or his data, and I can access that. But that person, like you said, is totally out of the system, and it's like a frozen. And don't we archive all that anyway automatically with the emails?
30 days,
30 days?
30 days.
Okay.
So what happens after 30 days, that automatically gets deleted and disabled. So Frank Abella only exists 30 days, that the count. Now, we've had individuals in the past request longer, and we don't. We won't accept that. It's just 30 days. You know you have 30 days, you got
get
30 days.
The stuff cleaned up from new worker, old worker, the boss, whatever, you got it 30 days.
Yeah, and I think they disable access immediately, right?
That is correct. So the access is
got what you-
disabled, the account has been changed, it's been encrypted and everything else of that nature. So again, if Frank Abella happens to get into the system, I can't get into anything at all, period.
Okay, thank you. Learn something new every day. Even things I didn't want to know. Anyway, great job.
All right. Any other comments on the payroll audit? So do we need to motion on this at all?
We do.
We do.
To accept it, basically, right? To send it to,
I move to approve the citywide payroll process internal audit report and direct staff to work on the recommendations as discussed.
second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes that item. Next item is on, up for possible action discussion and possible actions regarding the monitoring and review of the closure of the internal audit findings and the recommendations included in the audit findings track and report, and providing recommendations to the Board of Supervisors to close completed findings and/or recommendations. Sherry?
Thank you, sir. So I'll go through all of them real quick because we're getting down. We don't have a ton. So
Isn't this beautiful?
it is
Oh, it's a beautiful
beautiful. It is
day, you
beautiful.
guys.
So social media, the date was 12/31, so they need a little extra time. I didn't even ask them for an update because their date's 12/31. So we'll talk about that in March. The external IT vulnerability audit. Frank and I talked about this in some detail, and they're very close to getting all of these where they want them to be. But we went ahead and changed the date on most of them to 3/31/22. We talked to our auditor about coming in April and verifying that we have actually cleared all of these. So they would redo basically their testing like we talked about when we set this audit program and verify that they're all
Validation.
cleared. Kind of at the same time. So fleet management, we wanted to give them 6 months for that position to be open, so that's at the end of January. So again, we'll talk about that one in March. Ooh, sorry. I've got a recommended closure on the receivables audit. I did do my little spreadsheet for checklist for the receivables and actually all the closing entries for year end so that none of them get missed. I sent that to our external auditor and you know, we had no findings this year. You'll find out that on December 16th, but it's very exciting for me. But I'm going to recommend closure on this because we created the checklist, it works, and we're going to continue using it. And then on the payroll audit that we just completed, the one I'm going to recommend closure on is number 2 because of the 2 former employees we found. We immediately corrected that error. So they are now no longer in, they're disabled in Munis as well as the Active Directory. On number 3, the finding did say we'd have that complete by December 3rd. And as I explained, I think we need just a little extra time because I'm worried about the budget projections on that. So we're going to get that squared away before we finalize that. So those are the 2 recommended closures are the receivables finding 1 and the payroll finding 2.
Any questions, comments? No? Okay. Need a motion to close those 2 items?
So I would move to close the 2 items, the finding number 1 in the accounts receivable audit and finding number 2 in the payroll audit.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
It's related to the item 6C, discussion regarding the fiscal year 2022 audit program, an update on hotline activity, or hotline activity line. You're gonna cover this? Or is it Sherry?
I was just going to turn it over to Audrey.
Okay.
Here she comes.
Thank
Are you on
Sherry,
mute,
Audit
Audrey?
Committee
Oh.
Chair.
There you go.
I'm back. All right, so we had a couple of audits that were approved to move forward in the proposed internal audit plan. We just delivered the citywide payroll process on time, on budget. We are we've kicked off what we have titled insourcing versus outsourcing of the building division's activities. That will include the permitting, inspections, billing, revenue. That has been kicked off. We have started our initial round of interviews and data gathering, what we call our planning process. So internal audits have phases, and planning is phase 1. Then we get into analysis of the data, or what you would call field work. And then lastly would be the report. So we have this slated to be delivered April-May timeframe, maybe even as long as June. It really depends. We've had some latency in the initial planning process with Hope and her team, just with how busy the building division is. But we anticipate once we have the data in our hands, we'll be able to do what we need to move through that a lot faster. And as Sherry mentioned, on the IT vulnerability follow-up, we have that scheduled for April. And we will be in contact with the IT group in March to make sure that that still works in April. And then we had earmarked 20 hours, roughly 2,400 for follow-up activities. And then we also have the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, about 5 hours, 500 for that. And we also have the ARPA, the subject matter expert, set aside some funds for that in order to discuss with the city different questions that may come up as needed. And I believe that was it. I mean, that's all I see on my end. Would you like me to get into the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline? Or may I?
Sure. Thank you.
Excellent. So as of the last week, right before audit committee went through the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, as you know, it's called Lighthouse. This is our fourth quarter. We get in there, we look and see what's typically we don't see anything that needs to rise to the level of being brought to the city's attention. And in this case, we had 6 cases that were opened, and they all were around HR related incidences that we forwarded on to the city manager. And depending on how Nancy would like to resolve that, I believe she's getting HR involved. In recognizing that these are internal in nature, they do need a resolution, and we'll circle back and see how those were resolved.
They're related to the library.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Hearing none.
Audrey, if you need any help lighting some fires or anything with the building permits division, you let me know.
Okay,
I'm pretty
thank
good at
you.
lighting fires.
Thank you.
Thanks, Audrey.
Yes.
Next up is 6D, just discussing next audit committee date.
So I looked, and pretty much any Tuesday in March is open. I was thinking, since most of her reports probably, or the auditor's reports probably won't be ready until June, that we could spend a majority of the March time on planning for next year. So what kind of audits we'll be looking at for fiscal '23. And I will be going out, we're going to do an SOQ because the Eid Bailey's contract is up June of 22. So we're going to put out a statement of qualifications and see what we get. I have no problem with Eid Bailey, and I really hope we can hire them again because they've been great.
Okay, I don't know,
Does any day in March work better or worse?
15th doesn't work for me.
how about the
Okay.
8th?
8th, it's fine.
Audrey, is it better or worse earlier or later in the month of March for you guys? Does it matter?
No, it does not matter. I'm open on either of those Tuesdays.
Okay. 8th,
Let's do the 8th,
8th,
Okay.
1:30?
1:30?
March 8th, 1:30. The school district does have a meeting at 6 o'clock that night, so we have to be out by 5.
Okay,
Forbid.
Shouldn't have a problem, just,
okay, thank you. So the next audit committee meeting is going to be March 8th at 1:30 March 8th, 2022, believe it or not, and 1:30 p.m. Public comment, we don't have any public on the phone. Is there any
Oh.
public?
I would like to make a public comment.
Yes.
Bonnie, our new audit committee member, is here. She was appointed at the last Board of Supervisor meeting, and she's also been read in. So she'll be attending March meeting on March 8th.
Okay, great. Welcome, Bonnie.
And then just under public comment to let you know, I'm not sure how it will go yet, but during the January meeting of the Board of Supervisors, I'm going to be recommending that they consider someone else for the audit committee besides me. I certainly believe I'm the right candidate. I'm not going to say that, but my son was promoted to a partner in Eide Bailey. And I just feel that it's, while I can disclose and do the proper thing at all times, it's just, I think, in the best interest for both Eide Bailey and for the city that I not sit on the audit committee. I don't have anyone jumping, however, to take the role, and I know that surprises each and every one of you. And hopefully even my display today indicates I really am colorblind to whoever is on the other end. It's really the best interest. And so I just letting you know I'm going to ask the board to replace me. So just want to put that on the record that I've enjoyed working with each and every one of you. I am super excited that we have such an engaged audit committee. I don't think other communities are that lucky from both an internal review and an external review. I think that most, unless there's really something awful going on like Tiregate in Douglas County, it's pretty much a document that's never looked at, never used. And I am very proud that that's not so in Carson City. We take it very seriously, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed working with each of you, knowing that you're here to make sure that your government is running well and doing the right thing, and hopefully making sure we never have a Tiregate, because we do care. So just want to say thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It'd be sad to see you go. I think you are the right, from the board.
Sure, absolutely.
You're the right person for this committee, so.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see what happens, but thanks for your assistance and help over the years. Okay, public, there's no public on the, did any public join the phone?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will adjourn. Thanks for attending. Have a great afternoon. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Bye, Audrey. Bye, Nick.
Bye.
Thanks for your help, guys. Bye now.